All right. Thanks for getting those screens up, Brooke. And hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. And a big thank you to BSU's Hazard and Climate Resilience Institute for hosting us as part of your community presentation series. As Carson mentioned, I'm Amy Mateus, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Brooke Pierce. The Sun Valley Institute for Resilience was founded in 2015 with the purpose of cultivating a resilient and prosperous community, both in the Wood River Valley region and beyond. Over the last half decade, we've accomplished many feats, including hosting the Sun Valley Forum, which brought thought and action leaders from across the globe into our cherished home, strengthening our community's energy independence with initiatives like Solarize and Rev Up Lane, collaborating with community partners to grow our region's capacity, and cultivating our local food community through our program, the Local Food Alliance. Our current focus is on the food system as a keystone for broad-scale community and regional resilience. Since we're here at a presentation hosted by the Hazard and Climate Resilience Institute, I imagine many of you are familiar with the term resilience. I wanted to provide you with the definition that we use. We believe that resilience is regionally specific, therefore the solutions must be grounded in the needs of each unique community. In our opinion, the common ingredients to community resilience are a sense of place, a sense of belonging, and a sense of security. To put this into context, I'll give you an example of resilience through the lens of our food system work. Developing a sense of place can be viewed as community members knowing what grows well in their bioregion and how to prepare it for a tasty meal. A sense of belonging is very much entwined with the food system, as food provides a context for connection, and food is a defining aspect of culture. And finally, the sense of security one feels when regionally grown, nutrient-dense food is both accessible and affordable. Now that I've given you a bit of an idea of where we're coming from, I want to share how we do this work. We raise awareness of the regional food system through various initiatives, including our publication of the Locally Grown Guide. We collaborate with community partners in various ways, and in 2020, we co-created a vision of a regenerative and nourishing food future for Southern Idaho. We invest in the food system through our newly launched program, the Impact Idaho Fund, which you'll learn all about in just a moment. But first, I want to give you a brief overview of the problems we face and the opportunities at hand. Our existing global food system is really wrought with concerns, from degenerating our natural resources by chemical use and tillage to overfed yet undernourished populations, leading to a multitude of chronic health issues. Farmers in the US are aging out. 70% of farms will be transitioning out of current ownership over the next 20 years, and that farmland is facing development pressure. In Blaine County alone, we've lost over 100,000 acres of farmland since 2015, and that trend is even more daunting in the Treasure Valley. Idaho is the third largest user of fresh water in the country. We consume over 15 billion gallons of water per day for agricultural purposes alone. It's such an unfathomable number, but gives us a bit of a perspective as to the resource burden of our current food system. Idaho is also a rich agricultural state, yet we export over 90% of the food that we produce here, and we import most of the food that ends up on our plates. While agriculture has continued to be a major part of our statewide economy, the reliance upon volatile commodity markets, the high cost of land, an unreliable labor force, and dwindling water resources has made farming an even more difficult career to pursue. On the other hand, the demand for locally grown organic food is increasing. Agriculturalists in our state have an opportunity to meet growing market demands and ensure farmland preservation for generations to come. In late 2019 and early 2020, we worked on a co-created vision for Southern Idaho, which received semi-finalist standing in an Open IDO, Second Muse, and Rockefeller Foundation competition. This vision imagined a food future where all are nourished by regional, regeneratively grown food, where the bioregions of Southern Idaho flourish, and where the needs of all community members are met. We'll now take some time to share a video with you that highlights the breadth of our co-created vision. So Brooke is going to pull that up, and it's going to take just a second because videos are difficult and it's not that easy just to press play. Let's see.
When you share the screen, Brooke, make sure in the bottom it says you can check a box that says optimize for video and sound or something like that to make sure those are checked before you share.
Okay, will do.
Okay, thanks, Brooke.
Okay, Give me some thumbs up if you can see this and hear it.
From our rugged mountaintops to our expansive rangelands and canyon riverbeds, there are few landscapes in America as unique as southern Idaho. Centrally located and home to the Sun Valley Institute, the Wood River Valley is an innovative community of land stewards, food entrepreneurs, progressive community leaders, the rich and famous, and the intellectually curious changemakers. Yet, southern Idaho's unique landscape is also vulnerable to the ongoing effects of anthropogenic climate change. These threats include droughts and erratic weather patterns, wildfires, dependence on non-renewable, unreliable energy sources, and the rapid urbanization of what was once farmland and wildlife habitat. Limited opportunities for economic diversity, combined with transportation and housing challenges, have degraded quality of life and place. The number of individuals experiencing poverty, homelessness, mental health issues, and poor access to quality food and healthcare is steadily increasing. Sustaining a truly successful community here is impossible.
It looks like we just lost the video, Brooke.
Okay. Me.
It was working great though.
Mhm.
Of course.
There we go.
Community members
All
eat
good?
nutritious,
Yep.
regionally grown food, working with policymakers to increase the adoption of renewable energy production, and partnering with farmers to develop conservation-focused farming practices. Our vision for 2050 is of a food system that is regenerative, inclusive of all communities, and that contributes to the climate-smart, resilient world we all call home. Join us in envisioning the future of a food system that serves as a protector of the planet and of all people. The future of regenerative agricultural and food systems depends on stakeholders sharing a vision and breaking down modern-day barriers. The broad-scale use of synthetic chemical inputs, leading to water quality issues, the overuse of water, causing aquifer depletion, and changes in agricultural practices that end up removing farmers from the landscape. The resilience of southern Idaho depends on us regenerating our natural resources. By 2050, we envision that our region's agricultural system will no longer be a primary source of greenhouse gas emissions, as farmers and ranchers throughout the region have transitioned to a regenerative system. Regenerative practices provide many ecosystem services, including reduced drought and flood vulnerability, increased water infiltration that reduces topsoil and nutrient runoff, lower dependence on synthetic chemicals, and increased potential for carbon sequestration on farmlands, rangelands, and forest lands across the region. These practices will enable southern Idaho's struggling watersheds to fully regenerate for the first time in decades, benefiting everyone in the community. Right now, Americans are overfed yet undernourished. The prevailing diet lacks critical nutrients necessary for a healthy life. And due to economic challenges currently present in southern Idaho, many school children don't have access to the nutrients they need. Our vision for 2050 is one in which all children will have access to farm-fresh produce through the expansion of farm-to-school programs. All residents and visitors alike will share the incredible bounty that southern Idaho has to offer. Regionally grown seasonal foods will be accessible at all price points, at community spaces such as restaurants, retail stores, and events. Local food processing facilities will also ensure the year-round availability of regionally grown foods. Widespread education initiatives will enable everyone, regardless of demographics, to understand the importance of sourcing, cooking, and eating regionally grown whole foods. By 2050, the vast majority of agricultural energy use will be fueled by renewable technology, like solar and wind power, and geothermal energy will be used to heat greenhouses for year-round production. Energy production facilities and food production lands will exist symbiotically alongside the surrounding natural environment, instead of in opposition. Smaller scale technology like biodigesters will provide hyperlocal, low-waste energy solutions for tasks like heating and cooking while promoting energy independence. The general availability of technologies like net zero storage facilities and multi-use farm equipment will increase, allowing small, diverse producers to run regenerative production and processing operations. Current policies protect large agribusiness entities while allowing diversified family farms to fall through the cracks. In our 2050 food system, policies at the federal, state, and local levels support and uplift diversified farm operations. From eliminating unsustainable subsidy programs to expanding initiatives like crop insurance to include diverse specialty and cover crops, we believe that entire communities benefit when lawmakers work with farmers. Incentive programs will motivate food producers to make environment-focused investments on their property, and a broad acknowledgement of the benefits of renewable energy will lead to a stronger legislative push for eco-friendly power. Building regenerative, resilient communities depends on acknowledging the ways in which economy and culture intersect. In 2050, we envision Southern Idaho as a region where eating locally produced, ecologically grown food is the standard, not the exception. The revitalization of regional farms will create new jobs that are safer and better paid, as well as create additional market opportunities, which in turn will bring more diverse people, ideas, and businesses to rural communities. As local farms and businesses diversify their revenue streams, the communities will become more resilient. Farmers will finally be paid fair prices for the food they produce, as consumers understand and support the work farmers and ranchers do to produce food in a way that honors the natural landscapes. The revitalization of regional rural economies will not only bring economic stability to businesses, but also reduce unemployment rates and improve overall quality of life and place to communities throughout the region. The Southern Idaho region is filled with both dynamic challenges and significant opportunities. Thankfully, our community is already home to countless innovators who are passionately pursuing multi-pronged solutions for some, if not all, our biggest challenges. Our goal at the Sun Valley Institute is to create an enduring quality of place and people. Proper resource allocation is key to ensuring that all people can not just access the essentials, but to actually achieve their dreams and ambitions. This we call quality of life, and obtaining it depends on universal access to real, high-quality food. That's why for years, we've worked to connect local food producers with leaders from across government, academia, business, and beyond. It's through our partnerships within our local community and with communities across the globe that we rapidly progress towards our food system vision for 2050. A vision of a system in which agriculture and nature exist in harmony with each other. A system in which smart policy and strategic technology investments create new opportunities for local farmers. And a system in which economy and culture connect deeply with and benefit deeply from all aspects of the community in which they exist. We at the Sun Valley Institute couldn't be more excited about the future that lies ahead. Thank you for allowing us to help make the world a more regenerative and resilient home for all.
All right, thank you, Brooke, for making that work. Sorry for those few little glitches. I hope you enjoyed that video, and I will, once we're done presenting, I'll share a link to the YouTube version so you all can watch it at your own convenience. And now we'll get back into our slideshow. And here we go. Okay, so while we at Sun Valley Institute for Resilience have really been working on our regionalized food system for a while, many experienced the weaknesses in the global food system firsthand during the early days of the COVID pandemic. Do you recall going to the supermarket and seeing empty shelves? Are you worried about the increasing cost of groceries that many are predicting? With adversity, a seed is planted. And while COVID illuminated the lack of resilience in our current food system, it also created a platform for us to rally investors and donors to implement our food vision through the Impact Idaho Fund. I'll now pass it over to my colleague, Brooke, to get into all those details.
Perfect. Thank you, Amy. SVIR launched the Impact Idaho Fund pilot to attract and mobilize mission-driven capital for innovative projects advancing community resilience in South Central Idaho and beyond. Our fund thesis is to advance community resilience. And by that, we mean investing in the build-out of sustainable, renewable, and regenerative practices related to food and agriculture, land, water, and energy use. We are currently focused on regional food and regenerative agriculture as a keystone for achieving this vision. For those of you who are familiar with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, our objectives align to UN SDG number 2, which focuses on food security, improved nutrition, and sustainable agriculture, as well as UN SDG number 11, which promotes community resilience. Through the fund, we are striving to achieve the following outcomes. 1, we want to strengthen the regional supply chain by addressing gaps and creating redundancies, ultimately providing more affordable, more reliable access to nutrient-dense foods and other agricultural goods and services. 2, we want to fund sustainable food and agricultural practices that really focus on natural resource regeneration, considering proper land, water, and energy use. And 3, we want to demonstrate replicable business and investment models that we can share and scale to promote local, regional, and statewide resilience. Our overarching role as fund manager is to raise money from donors and beneficial investors on the left-hand side of the screen, and then distribute those funds to vetted projects that meet our impact and financial objectives on the right-hand side of the screen. We do this by administering funds in the form of recoverable grants, which are akin to 0% interest loans. And then over time, the investees repay the borrowed funds. Once the money is returned to us, we repay our investors, and any additional capital is recycled into the fund to be used for other impact-forward resilience projects in the future. Now that you have an overview of the fund, I want to share some impact stories. One example of a project that we recently funded is Ittybitty Farms, a family-owned farm and greenhouse operation with an on-farm retail store in Cary. Ittybitty is essential to the local food system. Before they opened their storefront in March of last year, Cary was considered a food desert, a community that lacks access to healthy and affordable food. Ittybitty Farms is using the funds in 3 key ways. First, they purchased protective growing structures, which are similar to greenhouses, that will allow them to expand their growing space by 800 square feet, extend their growing season by 1 to 2 months on either end, and increase their annual yields by 10,000 pounds. Second, they integrated mechanized non-chemical weed mitigation techniques that will not only improve their operational efficiency, contributing to long-term business viability, but also expand their use of regenerative agricultural practices, demonstrating proper land stewardship. And finally, they purchased a freezer unit that will enhance their on-farm retail store, allowing them to expand their offerings to include locally raised meat. This is in addition to their existing offerings of staple products, including the locally grown produce from their own farm, as well as locally sourced milk, eggs, and cheese, a variety of value-added products and shelf-stable necessities. This project scales up the production and the availability of nutrient-dense food in a very food-scarce community. Another example of a project that we selected for investment is Lookout Farm, a beyond organic, diversified vegetable farm in Bellevue. They plant just about every crop that is viable in our high desert climate, and they extend their season through greenhouses and high tunnels. They have 14 acres, 2 of which have been transitioned from alfalfa hay to vegetable production. Lookout Farm is using the funds to transition an additional 2 acres from animal feed to the seasonal vegetables on our plates. This investment will expand their use of organic food production methods and precision agricultural practices. Precision agriculture is a tool used by these regenerative farmers at Lookout to gather data from plant sap, which then informs appropriate input use and decreases nutrient runoff into the watershed. In addition to creating greater access to nutrient-dense human food, the project will also dramatically reduce water consumption, since row crop vegetables utilize more efficient irrigation techniques as compared to alfalfa hay. This project will also serve as a model for future land use transitions by other local food entrepreneurs, creating ripple effects for smallholder agriculturalists in similar bioregions. Our current investments have underscored the need for this type of financing vehicle, one that offers patient capital to drive local and regional community resilience projects. As we look forward to the future, we are reviewing applications for funding that will allow us to expand our portfolio of projects, exploring new opportunities that meet our core impact and financial criteria, yet still differ in both scope and scale. By supporting diversified family farms with varied operations, the region will become more resilient in the face of our changing climate. Using the fund as a platform to achieve community resilience through regional food and regenerative agriculture, we are able to take incremental steps towards transformational change.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was great. So Brooke, if you want to stop screen sharing for the Q&A portion, I kind of like to see people's faces if people are open to it. Thank you guys so much for that presentation. That was really interesting, and all those beautiful photos of food made me want to eat them.
It's almost lunchtime, right?
So while audience members are maybe thinking of some questions, which you can feel free to pop in the chat or raise your hand or just turn on your video if you want to and go for it. I'll just start off with a couple. I thought it was really interesting to hear about kind of your model for funding. And I was curious how, well, that's not specific to the funding, this question, but just if you could talk a little bit more about how you're building kind of local relationships in your community and what that has looked like, and those examples of the 2 farms that you guys are working with just sounded so interesting. I'd love to hear some more about that.
I can start off with talking about the relationship aspect, and then Brooke can kind of get into more of the fund specific model. So we've been working with our regional food producers for over 6 years now. So we do a lot with promoting our local food producers, supporting our farmers markets, connecting growers with potential buyers like retail stores, restaurants, individuals. And that really allowed us to build those relationships where we were already had trust built up with some of our local growers. So when we decided to do this, and we've been working on it for about a year now. So it all happened really quickly, and we needed relatively shovel-ready projects to test our concept, to test our due diligence process, to test our impact metrics. So we worked with a couple of those farmers that we had really close relationships with and helped them through the process as they helped us really understand, like, how can we make this work? How can we test our assumptions? How can we test and make sure that we're doing this right? So we're really lucky to have partnered with those producers during the pilot phase, and they've helped us make sure that we have the processes in place for us to expand it out to work with producers that we don't necessarily have that close relationship with, because we have those other producers that we can lean on and ask for support and help to better understand things. So our application is now open to any producers throughout the region. And we're having people apply that we actually don't necessarily know, but having that background of testing and iterating through the pilot phase has really helped us make sure that we feel good knowing how to approach producers that we have not yet met.
Yeah, and then from an investor donor side, we're currently tapping into the existing donor base for Sun Valley Institute for Resilience, because we are administering recoverable grants, which are essentially loans with 0% interest. So we work with some donors who are providing just straight charitable donations. And then we're also working with a few beneficial investors who are providing recoverable grants to us. So they're expecting just a return of principal with no interest. For any of the items that are coming from charitable donations, that actually means that once we get those funds back from the borrowers, we can recycle and use that to fund other projects. We hope eventually to move from recoverable grants to a really, really low interest debt instrument, so that we can tap into a greater capital base. Right now, we're sort of limited to people who see outsized impact over returns, but we'd love to tap into a base where people are receiving a very low return, so still impact first, but it'll allow us to sort of expand beyond the current donor base that, Sun Valley Institute already had access to.
Great, thank you. And what level are these grants? Are they like small grants, or are they like, is it kind of a range or dependent on situation?
We have a complete range. There's some people who have provided individual donations, I would say as small as like 2,500 or 5,000. And then we've also had contributions at the $75,000, $100,000 level. So we're in a range, but still sort of on a smaller scale. And eventually, as we scale up the fund, that number will increase. Hopefully we'll still have the smaller amount because we want to keep it democratized and we want people to be able to contribute at any level, but we will also hopefully be bringing in people who will have higher ticket sizes as well.
Great, that's really exciting. All right, it looks like we have a question in the chat from Denise Dixon with the Idaho Farmers Market Association. She asks, are you associated with the Hunger Coalition in Bellevue?
They are community partners of ours. We have obviously separate nonprofit organizations. We work closely with them. They are essentially our local food pantry that does incredible work feeding those with food insecurity. They also grow food. So they are kind of a producer in our area, but not on a commercial scale, as everything they grow is donated to the client base that they work for or work with. And we have partnered with them in the past. We're currently partnering with them on a community composting project. They sought our support on that because they want us to help them model it and potentially look at how do they make it energy efficient with adding solar onto it. So we are not necessarily associated with them legally, but we are partners with them in our community, and we really appreciate what they do. And they just opened the Bloom Community Food Center, which is a wonderful thing to have in our community that will really create a place for people to gather for stuff to happen related to food systems, with a commercial kitchen. One of our projects that we're working on, we're using their space, their community room, to create packages that are going out to youth in our community. So we're close with that organization, definitely.
Brittany, go ahead.
Well, that was a great presentation, and I just love the video too. And your vision for 2050 is amazing. It does seem that it's going to take a pretty massive culture shift to get something like that accepted in Idaho, and really people are excited about it. So what do you see are some of your biggest challenges with shifting the culture to more of a regenerative, resilient mindset?
I think it's slowly starting to happen. When we started working on the vision, it was pre-COVID. And I think we had big plans of doing a roadshow and getting in front of like the Barley Commission and the Idaho Farm Bureau and presenting it to them and asking them for them to be more engaged on it. Due to COVID, some of that has become kind of second tier as we understand that people are dealing with like immediate needs and immediate direct action. But we are still talking about it. And I think there's a couple, like the multiple layers of barriers. Like for one, the immediate need versus like the long-term strategic thinking. I think a lot of us are really comfortable reacting versus like thinking proactively. So that's definitely like a cultural shift of how do we change the narrative around like resilience is about planning for the future, not necessarily just like figuring out how do we bounce back from disaster. So hopefully places like you all can help change that cultural, the narrative around what resilience is. And then I think overall, we're seeing a shift around consumer behavior to really want more local fresh food, to want to support local businesses more because of the COVID pandemic. But I see it like our food vision is for 2050. So the real people that this is going to engage with are the youth. So figuring out how do we get conversations like that in school curriculums. As Ron, I don't know if you all have heard of Ron Finley. He's the gangster gardener from South Central LA. And he talks about like, how do you make gardening sexy? Like, how do you make agriculture sexy for people? And part of it is having like delicious food, right? And having delicious food be available for people, having it be accessible, creating what Dan Barber called the third plate, or like the third places where people can gather and create community, because peer-to-peer, person-to-person is the best way to change culture. It doesn't really come from the top down. We can't have somebody like wagging a finger like, you must eat local food. We need people to feel that from the ground up, to feel rooted in place and feel connected to the food they eat, to where their food comes from. And I think there's a variety of ways to do it, from like food at FFA and 4-H to our local fairs, to just like changing the school food programs, to getting fresh local produce and like senior connection. Like our local establishment is called the Senior Connection, that serves food to seniors in our area, and they're partnering with the farm to get the fresh food there. And like once people taste real local fresh food, it's hard to go back. So I think part of it is like the cultural change of taste and appreciation of agriculture and food, and then changing the way that education addresses these topics and making it sexy, because who doesn't like things that are sexy, right?
I love that. That's awesome. It looks like we have a hand raised from Evan, and then we'll do a question in the chat after he's done.
Hi, yeah, my video is not working, so
No
I'm
worries.
waving at you, but you can't see me. So that was really great presentation, and pretty reaffirming. I just finished my thesis work on pretty much this, which is all about like the social connections around small scale agriculture and all the parts that make it up. I'm wondering how much work you do with sort of those folks that fall outside of the smallholder farmer category, which is sort of the everybody else that does some degree of regenerative agriculture, from backyard gardeners to CSAs and community gardens, etc. How do they fit in here?
The smaller than just small scale farmers have a huge role to play as they're shifting the culture, right? The more people that garden, the more people actually understand how much work it takes to produce food. That's firsthand experience. And one of the programs that I also run is called 5B Resilience Gardens, where we're promoting the growth of our local gardens. So I think when people have that direct experience with their hands in the soil and see how you can incorporate regenerative practices into your own backyard, that helps them better understand like where larger scale producers are coming from. Mm-hmm. We definitely work with CSAs. Lookout Farm offers a community supported agricultural program currently. Ittybitty Farm does not, but they do have an on-farm retail store, which is really awesome for them. And then we do work with larger scale producers as well. And while that hasn't been our focus in the past, because of this food vision, we realize that the majority of food producers in Idaho are mid to large scale. They like changing 1 or 2 acres of practices is wonderful, but it's not going to have the landscape change that we see as necessary. So you have to engage with producers at larger scale so you can change 100,000 acres, 250,000 acres, because we have these producers with big swaths of land that have the ability to really change an entire watershed. So I really think that is an important aspect of the work that we do. And through my work on the Idaho Center for Sustainable Agriculture board, we work with larger scale producers more often than the smaller scale ones, because that's just our area of focus. And I think our land grant university is doing a great job engaging with producers at that scale and helping them incorporate cover cropping and doing work around aquifer regeneration, and also like what's going on with the Snake River Plain and the Snake River watershed in general. I think we're starting to see a shift and people really understanding like that their practices on farm have an impact downstream, and it takes us to make changes on farm to have an overall impact on the entire watershed.
Yeah, that's cool. Kind of to follow up on that, if I might, I wonder, or, is there a way that you're finding ways to connect sort of all those people, the large scale farmer to the backyard gardener? I asked that specifically because I think there's a lot of social exchange of information that can support kind of the two-way flow of how, or maybe more than two-way flow, but how all the different parts might adjust, learn, create together. Because I think that with those large scale farmers having such a big ecological impact, there's also a pretty large, potentially large, which is, this falls well outside my research. I'm way into speculation now, but there's quite a few people, maybe more than we're aware of, that are collectively having a really big ecological impact on their own little small pieces of land. So I wonder how folks might be connected a little bit more overtly to share that information and continue to find new ideas for change kind of across all scales of production.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I mean, I think it's multiple ways that we can look at it. I think pre-COVID, we were doing a pretty good job of having events that would bring together regional producers and have them connect. That really shifted with everything going on with COVID. We've had some webinars to introduce some of our regional farmers to individuals here to kind of spark ideas and spark better understanding of what's going on. A lot of the farmers that we talk to are like, we need a very place specific or regional specific gathering that's solely for farmers. And I think Northern Idaho does something similar to that with the Cultivating Success program. And one of the biggest, I think, barriers that I see is that a lot of these amazing conferences that are hosted, like Soil and Water Conservation will host an annual gathering, and they'll bring in an expert, but that expert doesn't have experience here in Idaho. So what I see as really being important to do is to cultivate our own expertise in the region and give people who are working here on the ground, that have experience, that have gone through trials and tribulations with failures and successes, tell their story. And I know like University of Idaho has done some of those like on-farm demonstration days. I think the Nature Conservancy is opening up a couple demonstration farms in Southern Idaho, Magic Valley area. So it's really getting people on the farm and talking to people who have done it, who can give them direct experience and advice through their own personal operations, versus just continuing to bring in outside experts who on paper, their ideas are awesome, but it doesn't necessarily play out here. And when you're a farm and you're operating on slim margins and you have contracts, you have road contracts, it's really hard to be innovative across the board. So we have to support those farmers in their desire to shift and transition. And that's one of the things that the Impact Idaho Fund really wants to do, is be a financial lever to support that transition, so the burden doesn't only fall on farmers, because we see that so often that the farmers bear all the burden. How can we offset that a little bit? And it's by being understanding consumers, by being nonprofits or research people that are willing to help out and to share those stories more, and to support programming that really allows for farmers who want to share their story, to give advice, to be mentors to young farmers or upcoming farmers or transitioning farmers.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's pretty dead on. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being here.
All right, it looks like we have some good questions here in the chat. I'm also going to just launch a quick poll because I like to find out where our audience is from. So if you wouldn't mind filling that out while I ask this question. Okay, so this is from Tara Posey, who's a Boise State, actually, she just graduated, but she was a Boise State student. She said, wonderful presentation, Brooke and Amy. I'm curious how involved SVIR is with individual farms once they are funded through IIF. Does SVIR collaborate on developing specific regenerative practices, or does the funded farm come up with these changes on their own?
Brooke, do you want to talk about that a little bit? Do you want me to?
I can speak to some of the pieces that are, less impact forward. But generally, I mean, the farms are coming to us with their ideas. They usually have practices that are founded in regenerative agriculture or organic methods, and they need financing to execute a project that they have in mind. Amy does support them in building out those practices, but a lot of times, it's working alongside them. From a financial perspective, which is where my expertise comes in a little bit more, we work with them from beginning to end, because again, their expertise is in food and agriculture, not necessarily in business and financial planning. So we provide a lot of support through the process, beginning with the due diligence, where we really vet these projects and make sure that they are, financially sound. We help them create historical financials as well as projected financials. We help them understand how to operate their business more efficiently, and also how to support their dreams and their projects. And then once we actually provide the funding, we help them on the back end. We ask for impact and financial metrics so that we can convey impact and financial stories to our donors and investors. And so we help them alongside on the back end as well to help them understand the impact of their projects, how to aggregate those stories across farmers or producers, as well as how to report on the financial successes. But it's really important to us that we don't provide a loan or money that would create financial strain. And we want to create a repayment period that's really flexible, that understands the growing seasons versus lower seasons, not asking for a payment in February, asking, for payments towards the end of a growing season when they have cash flow, making sure that they have enough cash coming in from their sales to repay. So that's where a lot of the technical assistance comes in. And maybe Amy can speak a little bit more to the practices.
Yeah, absolutely. I am by no means an expert in regenerative farming. I am book smart in it, but we definitely lean on existing entities like NRCS, like our local soil and water conservation districts, like our local extension agents, because although regenerative agriculture has become really trendy in the past couple of years, the work that organizations like NRCS have been doing are rooted in these practices. It's about soil health. It's about natural resource conservation. So there's a lot of programs and a lot of knowledge just within those existing entities. So we definitely direct people to those. And I think a lot of the smaller scale farmers or direct to consumer farmers aren't necessarily aware that they exist or aware that those technical service providers can or want to work with them. So a lot of the time it's just introducing that to them and saying like, have you talked to our soil and water conservation district yet? Do you need an introduction to them? Have you touched base with our extension agent? Because we don't have that layer of expertise. Like, I'm not an agronomist, I'm not a soil scientist, so I'm not comfortable telling farmers like what inputs they need or what crop they should be growing. But we can connect them to the people who are professionally inclined to give that type of advice. So I think that's really important. I think also getting smaller scale farmers involved with like the Idaho Farm Bureau Association, which is a grassroots organization. By getting involved with that, you can help change policy because they listen to their members. Same thing with, I know Chris Johnson in the chat mentioned our local working groups for NRCS. Like, we don't have any small farmers that show up for those from Blaine County, so their voices aren't heard. And I do attend those and I try to speak on behalf of them, but I also I don't want to be a gatekeeper by any means. I think it's more important to have a spectrum of people's ideas being showing up at those meetings and sharing from their own personal experiences. So a lot of the work that we do is informing our local farmers about these opportunities of how they can get their voice heard, how they can show up and really help set the agenda at some of these larger bureaucracies or governmental organizations that have been working in this space and don't really hear from that scale of farmers. Because the more we show up and the more our voices are heard, the more we can institute change.
Thank you. All right, we have probably time for maybe one more question, one or two. Here's one from Johanna Bell with the Association of Idaho Cities. Have there been relationship building between these efforts and how we here in Idaho are integrating our refugees into our communities?
We have not officially built any relationships with like Global Gardens efforts over in the Treasure Valley. We are aware that those are happening and would love to engage in it. We don't have an entity like that within the Wood River Valley region, but we are definitely interested in incorporating that and feel like having refugees integrated through agriculture is a wonderful way to continue diversifying our local growing community. So we're open to it, have not yet had the opportunity though to build those relationships currently.
Thank you. One other question I wanted to ask was, so you mentioned U of I has been involved in some of this stuff, and I wondered your thoughts on just how folks at Boise State and other groups kind of in the community that we have could help you guys or coordinate and collaborate going forward, and just what you see, how you see any sort of relationship developing there.
Brooke, you want to start?
Yes. So I think there's a few ways. One, we, are always accepting donations and investments, and every dollar counts. Anything that we raise goes directly towards the projects and the farmers. The other major way that we can build relationships and contribute is to continue to get the word out in terms of people who might need who might need funding. Our application is currently open, so if you have networks of people, if you're talking to people who are experiencing challenges, who are having trouble getting access to capital in the more traditional ways, that's where we like to come in. Most of the people that we work with really only have access to equipment leases or personal finances to fund any of these projects. They don't have access to capital through community development finance institutions or regional banks, because the banks don't really understand these types of projects and don't know how to underwrite the loans. So we really like to come in where there is a lack of access to capital and where we can provide that bridge in that gap. So if you're familiar with people and networks, sharing the opportunity, making sure people know that there is other opportunities for access to capital if they have projects in mind of, we have one farm right now that's looking to transition to organic. So it doesn't have to be coming from, they have a portion of land that is organic. They just bought a new portion of land. So they want to transition it to organic. It doesn't necessarily need to be at that standard when it's funded, as long as, it will transition to organic or based in regenerative along the way. So I guess keeping eyes and ears open. And if there's any feedback that you have, thoughts, we like to keep our solutions as grounded in the community as possible. Similar to what Amy said, we don't want to be gatekeepers. We want to uplift the voices of the people around us. So if there are any opinions or feedback on anything that we're doing, we're always open, and we'd love to hear from you. Amy, anything?
I'll just do a tiny little bit more. We're a really small organization and small team compared to other larger nonprofits in the region. And we have bitten off a really big project, and we want it to be very successful. And some things that from an academic standpoint that we would benefit from having support on is like getting the impact data and telling the story and really understanding like what are the best research models or best practices in sharing what we're doing outside of just like our own stakeholders, but on a national level or a state level. We're also here in the Wood River Valley, which is an amazing community, but we want to expand our reach out into all of Idaho. So having people connect us with organizations that they think would benefit from our work or be interested in it. Like we are very open to talking to people about what we're doing and seeing how we can collaborate. So those are two ways that I think people on this call and BSU and U of I could be really supportive to us. And we're always also looking for like grad student interns to help us expand our capacity a little bit. So if anybody ever thinks like something like this would be cool, we're open to getting support, because like Brooke and I spend a lot of our time on this and we're only 2 people. So there's a lot more that we could do if we had a larger capacity.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that there's definitely lots of opportunities for collaboration, and clearly there's students who are really interested in this. So I feel like that would be a really great avenue for working together going forward. So, well, thank you, Brooke and Amy. That was such a wonderful presentation, and so great to kind of close out the series for the year. So thank you again. And we will be on a hiatus for the summer and then picking up again in the fall with some new ideas and ways of kind of engaging. So thank you everyone who came, and have a wonderful summer, and we'll try and stay connected through all this. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you for everyone who attended. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.